Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone who joins us from around the world. We're so glad you're here. This is Andrew and Renee. Welcome to the Stack series. Today, we are exploring Preventive Medicine 2.0.
It's great to be here. And honestly, the timing for this is, it's really perfect. Here we are, February 2026, and it feels like we're in the middle of this massive, almost tectonic shift in how we think about health. Not just medicine, but, the very idea of being healthy.
It really does. And I think to get where we're going, we have to be really honest about where we've been. For decades, the whole healthcare system has worked on what you could call a reactive model.
Right.
I always think of it like car maintenance. We basically drive the car until the engine block cracks or, smoke is pouring out from under the hood. And only then do we finally decide to call the mechanic.
That's a perfect analogy for what we call sick care. The entire system, the hospitals, the insurance companies, the drug development pipeline, it's all been built to deal with symptoms after they've already appeared.
We wait for the crash.
We wait for the crash. We wait for the heart attack, the stage 3 tumor, the diabetic ulcer. And because we wait, the cost, both in human suffering and, economically, is just astronomical.
I was looking at some of the figures on this, and they are genuinely staggering. Something like, 75% of all healthcare spending in the U.S. has traditionally gone toward managing chronic diseases after they've already shown up.
75%.
It's like we're spending 3/4 of our money trying to put toothpaste back in the tube.
And that's the core tension we're really digging into today. We're in the process of moving from that reactive stance to what we're calling Preventive Medicine 2.0. And look, this is not just your grandmother telling you to eat more vegetables.
Right. This isn't just about diet and exercise pamphlet.
No, not at all. This is a complete paradigm shift towards something we call molecular preemption. The objective here is, frankly, audacious. It's to make the very concept of a symptom obsolete.
Make symptoms obsolete. That sounds like something out of science fiction.
It does. But the science is very quickly catching up to the fiction. The goal is to spot dysregulation, things going wrong at a biological level, during those silent periods of disease development. A disease doesn't just pop up overnight, it brews, sometimes for years. And for the first time, we actually have the toolkit to see it brewing.
And that's our mission today, isn't it? To unpack that toolkit.
Yeah.
We're talking AI, multi-omics, wearables, gene editing, but also we need to be honest and look at the hurdles because they're absolutely massive. So let's start with the foundations. What's the real difference between this old model, this reactive 1.0, and this new world of 2.0?
Okay, let's strip it right down. Reactive healthcare, or 1.0, is symptom-driven. You feel pain, you go to a doctor, it's episodic.
And it's fee-for-service, right? The system gets paid when I'm sick and need something done to me.
Exactly. It's a volume business, which is, when you think about it, a completely perverse incentive.
Yeah, if I stay healthy, the hospital doesn't make any money. The whole structure is fundamentally misaligned with the goal of wellness.
Perfectly put. But the biggest biological problem is the lag. By the time you feel that chest pain or notice that lump, the underlying dysfunction has likely been compounding for years, maybe even decades.
Like with heart disease, you don't just wake up one morning with clogged arteries.
No, that plaque has been building up slowly, silently since you were a teenager. Of course, treating the heart attack is essential, but it's the very definition of being reactive.
It's like waiting for your house to be engulfed in flames before you even think about buying a fire extinguisher. Whereas this proactive healthcare 2.0, it's about fireproofing the house while you're still building it.
That's precisely the idea. We define it as wellness-driven optimization. And it's built on a concept called P4 medicine.
I've seen that term floating around a lot, P4. What does that actually stand for?
It stands for predictive, preventative, personalized, and participatory. And these aren't just buzzwords. Each one represents a fundamental change in how we operate.
Okay, let's break them down. So, predictive.
Predictive means using your data, your genetics, your lifestyle, to foresee your specific risk profile long before anything bad happens.
And preventive is obviously doing something about that risk.
Correct. Personalized is the big one. It's the move away from treating the average patient. It's about treating you specifically, not just a generic demographic.
And the last P, participatory, that feels like the biggest cultural change. I mean, in the old model, the doctor was sort of this godlike figure. You went in, they told you what was wrong, you took a pill, and you left. You were totally passive.
You were. In P4 medicine, you, the patient, are a data generator and an active decision maker. Instead of these single episodic snapshots like a blood pressure reading once a year at your physical, We're moving to continuous predictive data streams.
So you're not just guessing what my blood pressure does when I'm stressed at work, you're actually measuring it in real time.
We're measuring it. And that, of course, implies a huge economic shift as well, away from volume-based care and toward value-based care.
So, in the old model, a hospital makes money by keeping beds full. In this new model, the system should be incentivized to keep you out of that bed. But is that really happening? Because it feels like we've been talking about value-based care for a decade, and I still get a bill for every single procedure.
It's a very, very slow ship to turn. But the economic pressure is becoming impossible to ignore. Right now, about 6 in 10 adults have at least one chronic disease. 4 in 10 have 2 or more.
The burden is just immense.
It is. And the system has these hidden costs for ignoring prevention. Think about it from a business perspective. It costs 5 to 25 times more to get a new customer, a new patient, than to keep an existing one healthy. Yet, health systems have historically focused on that acute volume.
But the insurance companies must be waking up to this.
They're starting to. They are realizing that paying for a continuous glucose monitor for someone today is a lot cheaper than paying for a foot amputation in 10 years.
That's a grim way to put it, but it's completely accurate. So this means the patient's role has to change too. You can't just be passive anymore. You have to be engaged.
In Preventive 2.0, you become the CEO of your own health. It's a major psychological shift. And you're not on your own. You have what we call digital coaching.
So instead of a doctor lecturing me once a year to lose some weight, I'm getting real-time feedback.
Exactly. Hey, your sleep quality was poor last night. Your heart rate variability is low. Maybe today is a good day for a walk instead of a high-intensity workout.
That kind of thing.
It creates a constant feedback loop that can actually drive behavioral change.
Yeah.
But for that loop to even exist, you need data. And that takes us from the philosophy to the frontiers. We need to talk about the actual tools that make this all possible.
Right. Philosophy is great, but it doesn't cure disease. We need the tech. And I think the most obvious place to start is with something that's become so common, but is also evolving so quickly. Wearables.
The wearable revolution, for sure. And we have to be really clear here. We are so far beyond just counting your steps. We're talking about the transition from basic fitness trackers to actual medical-grade biosensors.
I see them everywhere, but I think a lot of people still see them as gadgets. Did I close my rings today?
Yeah.
What are the specific technologies that are actually moving the needle from a medical standpoint?
I think one of the biggest game changers has been the continuous glucose monitor, the CGM. These were originally developed for people with diabetes to manage insulin, obviously. But now we're seeing them used by people without diabetes to understand their own metabolic health.
Yeah, I've seen this, the so-called biohackers with the patch on their arm. Is there real utility in that for an average person, or is it just data obsession?
Oh, there's huge utility. It's all about personalization. You might eat a bowl of oatmeal and your blood sugar stays perfectly stable. I could eat that exact same bowl and have a massive glucose spike, like into the pre-diabetic range.
And a generic dietary guideline sheet would never tell you that.
Never. Only a sensor can. It helps you see which foods are causing that glucose roller coaster, the spikes and crashes that over years drive inflammation and insulin resistance.
Okay, so that's metabolic health. What about stress? We're always told stress is a silent killer, but it's so subjective. I feel stress doesn't mean a lot to a doctor.
And that's where something like sweat analyzers come in. These are literally patches you wear on your skin that can measure biomarkers like lactate, electrolytes, and, most importantly, cortisol.
Cortisol, the main stress hormone.
The primary one. So imagine a device that can tell you objectively your cortisol levels are spiking right now, maybe even before you consciously feel that wave of anxiety. That allows for an immediate intervention. Deep breathing, a quick walk, stepping away from your email, or making the invisible visible.
And blood pressure is the other big one, the other silent killer. Usually the only time you know it's high is when the cuff squeezes your arm at the doctor's office.
And that single reading is notoriously flawed. You've got white coat syndrome, where your pressure shoots up just because you're in a medical setting. The new frontier is cuffless blood pressure monitoring.
How does that even work? I thought the squeeze was essential to, stop the blood flow and measure its return.
That's the old oscillometric method. The new sensors use different physics. Many of them use what's called pulse transit time. Basically, the optical sensors on the back of your watch, the little green lights, they time how fast the pressure wave from your heartbeat travels down your arteries.
Like a sonar ping going through a pipe.
That's a good way to think of it. The stiffer and more pressurized the artery, the faster that wave travels. By combining that data with an ECG signal, the algorithms can estimate your blood pressure continuously. It's not perfect yet for spot-on accuracy, but what it gives you is a trend line over 24 hours, while you sleep, while you work. That data is infinitely more valuable.
It catches the patterns you'd otherwise miss entirely. And speaking of catching things we'd miss, the heart itself. The Apple Watch, devices like Cardiomobile, they're actually detecting atrial fibrillation now with clinical-grade accuracy.
This is a perfect example of consumer tech becoming clinical tech. AFib, that irregular heartbeat, is a huge cause of stroke, but it's often intermittent. It might happen for an hour on a Tuesday and then not again for a week.
So a standard EKG in a doctor's office is almost guaranteed to miss it.
Almost guaranteed. But a watch that you wear all day, every day, it catches it. And that simple alert can literally prevent a stroke.
So we have all these sensors on the outside of the body, but what about what's happening on the inside at the really deep molecular level? This brings us to multi-omics. Now be honest. Omics sounds like a marketing term somebody came up with. What does it actually mean?
It does sound like jargon, I'll give you that. But it's actually a pretty logical naming system in biology. Omics just means the study of the totality of something. So genomics is the study of your entire genome, all your DNA. But Preventive 2.0 realizes that looking just at your genes isn't enough. We have to integrate multiple layers of data.
Okay, let's walk through those layers. We start at the bottom with genomics. That's the blueprint, right? The ingredients list you were born with.
Exactly. Genomics is the blueprint. It tells you what could happen. It outlines your potential risks.
Yeah.
But it's static. Your DNA doesn't really change over your lifetime, but your health does. So looking only at your DNA is like looking at a map of a city and trying to guess where all the traffic jams are at rush hour.
That's a great way to put it. The map isn't the traffic. So how do we see the traffic?
To see the traffic, we move up a layer to transcriptomics. This is the study of RNA. If DNA is the blueprint, RNA is the set of instructions being read from that blueprint right now. It tells us which genes are actually being turned on or off in real time.
So if my DNA blueprint says high risk of diabetes, the transcriptome would tell me, hey, those diabetes-related genes are actually being switched on right now.
Precisely. And then you have proteomics. That's the study of the proteins, which are the actual machinery of the cell. They're the little workers building things based on the RNA's instructions. And finally, you have metabolomics. This is the study of the chemical footprints left behind by all that cellular activity. It tells us what actually happened.
Let me try an analogy here to see if I've got this straight. Let's say we're baking a cake. Genomics is the recipe card. It's just sitting on the counter. Transcriptomics is the chef reading the recipe and shouting out orders to the kitchen staff. Proteomics is the staff actually mixing the batter and putting it in the pan. And metabolomics is?
Metabolomics is tasting the final cake after it comes out of the oven to see how it actually turned out.
And the reason this is so important, I'm guessing, is that you can have a perfect recipe, but if the chef misreads an instruction or the oven temperature is wrong, the cake is going to be a disaster.
That is a brilliant way to visualize it. You can have good genes but bad expression because of your diet or stress or environmental exposures. Multi-omics lets us see the entire process, not just the recipe card. And the tech that lets us do this is getting incredibly precise. We're now moving to what's called single-cell resolution.
What does that mean? We're looking at one cell at a time.
Literally, one cell at a time. In the past, if we wanted to analyze, say, a liver tumor, we'd take a chunk of it, grind it all up, and sequence the average of all the cells. But a tumor isn't one monolithic thing. It's a mix of different types of cells. Some might be resistant to chemotherapy, others might be sensitive. Bulk sequencing misses all that nuance.
It's like looking at a satellite image of a forest and just seeing a patch of green instead of being able to see each individual tree.
Exactly. Single-cell tech lets us zoom in on each tree. It allows us to understand that heterogeneity. And it's that level of detail that leads us to maybe the most exciting, most anticipated technology in this whole space. Liquid biopsy and multi-cancer early detection.
Yeah.
MCEDs.
This really is the holy grail of oncology, isn't it? The idea of finding cancer from a simple blood draw before there's even a tumor you can see on a scan.
It is. The whole concept is based on the fact that tumors, even very tiny ones, are constantly shedding little bits of their DNA into the bloodstream. We call this cell-free DNA, or cfDNA, and the bits from the tumor specifically are called circulating tumor DNA, or ctDNA.
So the tumor is basically leaking clues into the blood.
It is. But finding those clues is incredibly difficult. It's like trying to find a single grain of black sand on a massive white sand beach. The healthy DNA in your blood vastly outnumbers the tumor DNA.
So how do you tell them apart? It's all just DNA, isn't it?
It is, but the tumor DNA carries different markings, We're looking for what are called methylation patterns. Think of methylation as these little chemical tags like Post-it notes that are stuck onto the DNA. They tell the gene whether to be on or off, and different tissues have unique patterns. A liver cell's methylation pattern looks different from a lung cell's and cancer cells. Their patterns are completely chaotic and distinct.
So it's like a barcode.
It's a barcode. And that barcode can tell us two things. Not just if there's a cancer signal, but also where it's likely coming from, the tissue of origin.
Which is critical. It's not helpful to just tell someone, you have cancer somewhere in your body. You need to know where to look.
You have to know where to look. And there are actual tests for this now. They're on the market. Names like Gallery, CancerGuard, Guardant Shield. And we have real-world data from big studies, like the Pathfinder study.
Right, I read about that one. They tested over 6,000 people over the age of 50.
They did. And they found a cancer signal in about 1.4% of them. But here's the crucial part. Half of the cancers that were confirmed were early stage, stage 1 or stage 2. And many of them were for cancers that we have no standard screening for at all.
Like pancreatic cancer or ovarian cancer.
Exactly. The kinds of cancers we usually only catch when it's far too late.
It sounds like a miracle. But I know we're going to get to the active debate section later, and I have a feeling there's some very important fine print attached to this miracle. But before we get there, we have to talk about the thing that connects all this data. Because you've got wearable data, multi-omics data, liquid biopsy data. It's just a tsunami of information. No human brain can possibly process all of that.
It's completely impossible for a human. There is no doctor on Earth, no matter how brilliant, who can sit there and mentally correlate your entire genome with your metabolome and your continuous heart rate variability in real time. This is where AI has to step in as the orchestrator.
The necessary bridge.
It's the only way. AI and machine learning are what allow us to do things like create digital twins.
Define that term for us, digital twin.
A digital twin is a virtual computational model of a specific patient. We feed the AI all of your data, your genetics, your medical history, your real-time sensor data. It creates a simulation of you. We can then use that twin to run what-if scenarios. What happens if we give this virtual patient this drug? What is this person's 5-year risk of heart failure if they don't change their diet?
So you can test interventions on the digital version of me before you try them on the real me.
That's the ultimate goal, yes.
Yeah.
We're also seeing it in a field called radiomics. AI algorithms are now looking at medical images, CT scans, MRIs, and they're seeing subtle patterns in the pixels that the human eye just can't perceive. Texture analysis, tiny gradients in density, things that can predict if a tumor is aggressive or benign long before a pathologist could tell.
And the key is integrating all of this, tying the electronic health records to the omics data. Right now, my medical record is just a static PDF. It's dumb data. You're talking about making it intelligent.
Exactly. Connecting dots that are too far apart for any human to see. And once you can predict a disease, well, the ultimate goal of Preventive 2.0 is to stop it from ever happening. And that brings us to gene editing.
Right, the shift from treating to editing. This is CRISPR territory.
CRISPR-Cas9, the molecular scissors. And this has moved far beyond theory. We have to talk about the case of VRV101. This is a therapy for a condition called heterozygous familial hypercholesterolemia, or HeFH.
That's a mouthful.
It is. But basically, it's a genetic condition where your liver is terrible at clearing cholesterol from your blood. These people have dangerously high LDL cholesterol from birth. They're a huge risk for having heart attacks in their 30s or 40s.
And the standard treatment is just taking a statin pill every single day for their entire life.
Yes. And even then, it's often not enough to get their cholesterol down to a safe level. V101 is a single-course in vivo gene editing treatment. It uses lipid nanoparticles to deliver the CRISPR machinery directly to the liver cells, and it targets a specific gene called PCSK9.
And what does it do to that gene?
It breaks it. It intentionally introduces a small typo that deactivates the gene. The PCSK9 protein normally stops the liver from clearing cholesterol. By breaking the gene, you lower the protein, and the liver becomes a cholesterol-clearing soup machine. It's a permanent fix.
That's the difference between wrenching your health with a daily pill and actually owning it by fixing the underlying problem in the factory.
What a great way to put it. But of course, cutting DNA is a big deal. There are risks. What if you cut in the wrong place? And that's why the next frontier is something called epigenetic editing.
How is that different from standard CRISPR?
Instead of using molecular scissors to physically cut the DNA strand, which is permanent, and carries that off-target risk of accidentally snipping a vital gene, epigenetic editing is more like a dimmer switch. You attach a chemical repressor to the gene that just turns its volume down. You silence it without ever damaging the underlying code.
It's like putting a muzzle on a barking dog instead of, shooting the dog.
That is a vivid but very accurate analogy. It's potentially safer, and it could even be reversible.
This is all just mind-blowing. It really feels like we're on the cusp of rewriting what it means to be human. But this is the Stack series. We don't just, drink the Kool-Aid. We have to check the ingredients. And that means we have to dive into the active debate, because for all this amazing technology, the reality on the ground is incredibly complicated. And I want to go right back to that cancer screening test. You mentioned the Pathfinder study. It found cancer, which is great. But what about the people who got a positive signal but didn't actually have cancer?
This is the absolute crux of the issue. It's a problem of the patient in waiting and of overdiagnosis. In that Pathfinder study, while it did find real cancers, something like 62% of the initial positive signals turned out to be false positives.
Wait, hold on. Say that again. 62%? So
Yeah.
you're telling me that almost two-thirds of the people who got a call saying, our advanced blood test found a cancer signal, didn't actually have cancer at all.
That's correct.
I can't even imagine the terror of getting that phone call. Your entire life just grinds to a halt.
The psychological cost is enormous. You immediately enter this limbo state. You become a patient in waiting. And then you go through months of invasive, expensive follow-up tests, full-body MRIs, PD scans. Maybe they see a shadow on your lung and want to do a biopsy, which turns out to be just scar tissue from a flu you had a decade ago.
And the physical risk of that workup. A biopsy is not a risk-free procedure. You can get an infection, you can have bleeding. You are actively harming healthy people in the search for this needle in a haystack.
That is the fundamental trade-off of any screening program. And it's always a balance between sensitivity, how good it is at finding the disease, and specificity, how good it is at correctly identifying healthy people. These tests are designed to be extremely sensitive, which means they cast a very wide net, and that net inevitably catches a lot of false alarms. And there's another layer to this problem, the issue of indolent cancers.
What does that mean, indolent?
An indolent cancer is a tumor that is technically cancer, but it grows so incredibly slowly that it would never have actually harmed or killed the patient in their natural lifetime. A lot of prostate cancers are like this. Many thyroid cancers, too. Someone could live to be 95, die of a heart attack, and never have known they had a tiny tumor in their thyroid.
But once you find it...
Once you find it, you can't unsee it. Our medical system is profoundly biased towards action. So we treat it, we operate, we radiate, we give chemotherapy. That is overdiagnosis leading to overtreatment. We are curing people of diseases that would have never hurt them, but we're leaving them with the very real side effects of the cure incontinence, nerve damage, lifelong anxiety.
It's the watchful waiting dilemma. It takes a huge amount of courage from both the patient and the doctor to find a tumor and then decide to just do nothing but watch it. The impulse to just get it out must be overwhelming.
It is, and this brings up a really important distinction that you have to understand. The difference between clinical validity and clinical utility.
Okay, break that down for us.
A test is clinically valid if it accurately detects the marker it's looking for. Yes, we have confirmed there is circulating tumor DNA in this blood sample. The test works, but it only has clinical utility if finding that marker actually leads to a better outcome for the patient. Does it help them live longer or live better?
So just because you can see something doesn't automatically mean that seeing it is helpful?
Not at all. And you've got a perfect example of this with the dynamic study in colon cancer. I know you looked at this one, and it's just so eye-opening.
It really is. Walk us through it.
Okay, so the dynamic study looked at patients with stage 2 colon cancer. After surgery, it's always a tough call whether to give them adjuvant chemotherapy. Helps some, but it harms others with side effects. So the idea was to use a liquid biopsy, that ctDNA test, to guide the decision.
The logic makes perfect sense. If there's still tumor DNA floating around in the blood after surgery, that means some cancer was left behind, so you give them chemo. If the blood is clean, you spare them.
Exactly. Precision medicine in action.
Ooh.
So they randomized the patients. One group got the standard of care. The other group's treatment was guided by the ctDNA test.
And what happened?
Well, the results were very complicated. The ctDNA-guided strategy did not significantly improve recurrence-free survival. The outcomes were basically the same in both groups.
So the test didn't help people live longer.
Correct. Now, the ctDNA group did receive less chemotherapy overall, which is a good thing. But here's the catch. For the patients in that group who did get chemo based on their test results, they were given a much more aggressive and toxic drug called oxaliplatin. Its use was tripled compared to the standard group.
And oxaliplatin is not a gentle drug.
Not at all. It's notorious for causing severe, often permanent nerve damage, pain, and numbness in the hands and feet. So the fancy new test led to a more aggressive, more toxic treatment for a subset of patients, but it didn't actually improve survival for the group as a whole.
That is such a sobering reality check. More data led to more toxicity, but not better health. It really pushes back on this assumption that just knowing more is always better.
It does, and that flows directly into the massive economic question. Can we even afford any of this? Could you imagine the cost if we tried to screen every single adult with these high-tech tests every year? The system would go bankrupt.
Yeah, if I'm running an insurance company or a national health service, I'm looking at that bottom line.
We use a metric for this called the ICER, the Incremental Cost Effectiveness Ratio.
Hmm.
The problem with Preventative 2.0 is that it requires enormous upfront investment. Sequencing a genome, buying the wearables, running the liquid biopsies, that all costs a lot of money today.
Yeah.
The savings from preventing a heart attack or a stroke are decades down the line.
And in a world driven by quarterly profits or four-year election cycles, investing billions now for a payoff in 2046 is a really, really tough sell.
It's nearly impossible. The MCED debate is a perfect example. Some economic models suggest a test like Gallery is cost-effective because treating a stage 4 cancer can cost $1 million. So finding it early saves money. But other models argue that the cost of working up all those false positives, the scans, the specialist visits, the biopsies for the 62% of people who are healthy, that cost completely overwhelms any savings. You could end up draining the entire healthcare budget just chasing ghosts.
It's such a fragile balance. And speaking of balance, we absolutely have to talk about who gets access to this technology in the first place. This brings us to the broader implications, the ethics, the economics, the societal impact, because right now, this all sounds like a playground for the wealthy.
It is maybe the most important part of this entire conversation. Let's start with the equity gap. A lot of these predictive tools, especially things like polygenic risk scores, are built on data. But the question is, whose data?
Right. And historically, the vast majority of medical and genetic research has been done on people of European ancestry.
Overwhelmingly so. Depending on the data set, it's somewhere between 80 and 90% of the genomic data we have comes from people of European descent.
So you have these incredible AI tools that can predict your genetic risk for heart disease or Alzheimer's, but they've been trained on a white genetic baseline.
Precisely. Which means if you are of African or Asian or Hispanic ancestry, that algorithm is simply less accurate for you. It might miss a crucial risk factor that's common in your population, or it might flag something as risky that actually isn't.
So we are literally building racial and ethnic bias directly into the code of 21st century medicine. If we deploy these tools at scale, we don't shrink the health disparity gap, we make it even wider.
We could widen it dramatically. It's a form of algorithmic injustice. Now, there are major efforts underway to fix this, like the All of Us research program, which is focused on diversifying these databases. But it's a slow process, and if you look at this from a global perspective, in a resource-limited setting parts of Africa or Southeast Asia, how on earth do you justify a $500 blood test or a smartwatch when people lack access to basic antibiotics or clean drinking water?
The conversation seems almost obscene, talking about optimizing wellness, when the real issue is basic survival.
The ethical challenge is staggering. We run the very real risk of creating a new kind of biological caste system, the optimized and the unmonitored.
And then there's the privacy issue, the datafication of life. If my watch knows my stress levels, my toilet is analyzing my metabolites, and my full genome is stored on a server somewhere, who owns all of that data? This is starting to feel very much like the movie Gattaca.
It is the ultimate surveillance concern. Now, in the U.S., we have laws like GINA, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, which is supposed to protect people. It says your health insurer or your employer can't discriminate against you based on your genetic information. They can't fire you because you have the gene for Huntington's disease.
But GINA has some pretty big loopholes, doesn't it?
It has huge loopholes. It does not apply to life insurance, disability insurance, or long-term care insurance.
So an insurance company could deny me a life insurance policy because an algorithm says I have a high genetic risk for developing Alzheimer's in 30 years.
Absolutely. And that risk creates a chilling effect. It makes people not want to get tested in the first place. They'd rather not know than risk becoming uninsurable for their family.
And what if a company wants to hire me? They can't ask for my genetic data, but could they buy it from a third-party data broker who got it from a wellness app I used?
That is the fear. And the data brokerage industry is massive and largely unregulated. Then there's the cybersecurity angle. We're talking about creating these multimodal health records, merging your clinical data with your genomic data and your real-time wearable data. That file becomes the ultimate honeypot for cybercriminals. If your credit card gets stolen, you get a new one. If your genome gets stolen, you can't exactly get a new one of those.
That is a genuinely terrifying thought. So, lastly, I want to ask about the human side of this. What does all this mean for the people who actually work in healthcare? If an AI is doing the diagnosing and a watch is doing the monitoring, what happens to doctors? Do they become obsolete?
Not obsolete, no, but their role has to change, and it has to change dramatically. I think doctors will shift from being primarily diagnosticians, which is largely a game of memorization and pattern recognition, to being interpreters and coaches.
Because right now, so much of medical school is just brute force memorization.
It is. But an AI will always be better at memorization. It can read every medical paper published in the world, every single day. No human can compete with that. So you let the AI do the heavy lifting on data analysis and pattern recognition. The human doctor's role becomes about empathy, about nuance, about helping the patient navigate the data and make real-world behavioral changes.
So the human skills become more important, not less.
They become the absolute most important skills. The AI can tell you your risk is high, but it's the human doctor who can sit with you and figure out a realistic plan that fits your life. But for any of that to work, we have to solve the interoperability nightmare.
The fact that my watch doesn't talk to my doctor's computer.
And your doctor's computer doesn't talk to the hospital's computer, which doesn't talk to the specialist's computer. These data silos are the single biggest practical barrier to Preventive 2.0. If we can't get the systems to speak a common language, all we'll have are disconnected fragments of a map and never the complete picture.
So, to pull this all together, we're really standing on a precipice. We have these incredible tools that allow us to fix the roof before it even starts to rain. We can see the storm coming from miles away.
We can. The technology is largely here. The sensors, the sequencers, the algorithms, they exist. But our systems, our economic models, our ethical guidelines, our social structures, they have to catch up. And we have to be so careful to ensure that this revolution in health actually benefits everyone and doesn't just become another tool that widens the gap between the haves and the have-nots.
It's a brave new world, for sure. One where the question, how are you feeling, might be answered by an algorithm before you even open your mouth. But the hope, I guess, is that the answer will simply be healthy. Before we wrap up, thank you to all our partners, sponsors, and scholars who made this podcast and the research possible. We're truly grateful for your support. And to our listeners, thank you for being part of this journey with us. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and follow Stax Studios for more informative content. And support us in Patreon. Until next time, stay curious, keep learning, and let the search for wisdom guide you forward. Have a great day.